Good evening. My name is Linda Ward, and I am part of the board of Imagine Performing Arts. And tonight I am going to be singing a song from She Loves Me, a musical that is sort of based on You've Got Mail, if you remember that movie. We have two people who work in the same department store, and they can't stand each other. But when they're not working, they're part of a Lonely Hearts Club. So they write letters. They pick somebody out, they write letters. The thing of it is they don't know who they're writing to, so they don't know that they're writing to each other. So they decide to go ahead and meet. So she's sitting in the cafe, waiting for him, and he comes into the cafe, realizes who it is, and leaves. But not before he tells her, "Oh, you're here meeting somebody, but you know what? That guy is bald and he's fat and he's old. So you might think about that." But then the next day, he brings her ice cream. Vanilla ice cream. Dear friend, I am so sorry about last night. It was a nightmare in every way. But together, you and I will laugh at last night someday. Ice cream. He brought me ice cream. Vanilla ice cream. Imagine that. Ice cream. And for the first time, we were together without a spot. Friendly. He was so friendly. That isn't like him. I'm simply stunned. Will wonders never cease? Will wonders never cease? It's been a most peculiar day. Will wonders never cease? Will wonders never cease? Oh, wait, stop. Where was I? I am so sorry about last night. It was a nightmare in every way, but together you and I will have a last night someday. Okay. I sat there waiting in that cafe and never guessing that you were fat. Oh, no. That you were near. You were outside looking bold. Oh, dear. I am so sorry about last night. Last night, I was so nasty. Well, he deserved it, but even so, that George was not like this George. This is a new George that I don't know. Somehow
I'm Ian Kinder, and I brought along a little short piece that I'd written several years ago. I never really found a home for it, but it seemed appropriate for tonight. It's all about magic, about stage magic, about performance, and then about, the magic that really touches us. And it's called dollar magic. Honey, put that away and eat your food, my mother called across the table. But Mom, this place is boring. Son, my father said, if you're not going to eat here, then you're certainly not getting anything when we get home. I sighed and flicked the switch. That Game Boy was my only ray of light in this dim, dull restaurant. I never understood why my parents liked it so much, and always put me to sleep. It was like the restaurant played a strange lullaby, made up of the drone of idle conversation, the scrape and the clink of silverware, and the wash of music from the immense piano at the front. After taking a few sullen bites, I noticed that the rumble and tinkle of the piano had trailed off. I turned, and I saw the pianist walking right towards our table. My first thought was that he was upset with me for playing games rather than listening. Then I saw his eyes. They twinkled, even in the dim light. "Boy," he said, kneeling down beside me, "have you ever seen a silver dollar?" I managed a quiet, "No, sir." He reached into his breast pocket and produced a massive, shining coin. He flipped it into the air, spinning and flashing, then caught it again. "Well, son," he said, "there's a very good reason for that." "Really? Why?" He grinned, and the lines on his face slid naturally into place. "Magic, boy. There's too much magic in 'em, so they don't make 'em anymore. And they were making too much trouble. Now, I can see you're not quite following me. See, they'd lock 'em up in the banks, but that wasn't any good, see?" And the coin was back in his palm. He clapped once, hard. "'Cause they'd put 'em in the vault, but when they opened it up again to count 'em, you know what they'd find? Nickels. And there, between his knuckles, was a shining nickel. And so then they try to count up all the nickels, see, 'cause they gotta have their numbers. Only every time they try to count 'em, there'd be more of them. And another nickel sprouted, then another, every time he flourished his hand. But they'd keep at it, because they gotta have their numbers. But you know what happened then? I waited. Poof! He cried, whirling his hand with a snap. They'd vanish, just like that. He displayed his open, empty palm to my astonished eyes. And they never knew, he said, reaching toward my plate, where the things had gone, or where they'd turn up again. And then, lifting my plate, he pulled out that gleaming, enchanted silver dollar. "Yes, sir," he said, grinning ear to ear. "I'm lucky I can handle all the magic in one of these. Takes a special kind of touch, to even hold a silver dollar." He looked into my eyes, and I could see that twinkle again. And I knew then what it was. It was magic, real magic, shining out from inside. "Hold out your hand, boy. Let me see something." I eagerly complied. Then, excitement turned to horror as he dropped that shining magical coin right into my open palm. It landed with an audible slap, and I gasped, as I was terrified of what might happen if such magic rested in my untrained hands. I held my breath, suddenly aware that everyone in the restaurant was watching us. After the longest 5 seconds of my life, the pianist burst out laughing. "Well, would you look at that? The boy's got the touch after all." He looked at my parents and said, "Aren't you both so lucky to have such a special boy?" My mother smiled and laughed. My father nodded. The man chuckled again. "Of course you are." Then he held out his hand to me. "Well, son, if I may?" I stared at that beautiful coin, then at the smiling sorcerer. And finally, I returned the silver dollar. "Well, wasn't that nice?" said my mother as the pianist returned to his playing. She still has that beautiful knack for understatement. Years passed. There were more dinners, with only occasional magic, but in time my parents and I moved on to new surroundings. As I grew older, I came to understand the words coin trick, and even how to perform a few of them. Almost 2 decades from that first night, while passing through my hometown, I thought to visit the man at the restaurant, show him what I'd learned. I had even acquired a silver dollar of my own, that most magical of coins. I was assaulted by nostalgia the moment I stepped into the restaurant. Some of the paintings had changed, the tables had been rearranged, but the same lullaby played. Almost. The piano sounded subtly different. I peeked in, and I saw a woman at the bench. I turned to a passing waiter. "Is that a new pianist? I remember a man here years ago." The man's face clouded. "Oh," he said, "you must mean Doug. Have you been away?" "I'm sorry, but he passed away about a year and a half ago. A stroke in the night," they said. "Sudden, but, well, he wasn't a young man anymore." I was shocked. The old man was a wizard, full of life and magic and wisdom. Wizards didn't just die like a goldfish left unfed or an overwatered houseplant. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry. I came here to see him. I didn't know." "It's all right," said the kindly old waiter. "We all loved him here. Hey, you remember that old silver dollar?" "Of course I do. How could I forget?" The man pointed. "Look real close at the piano lid over there." And at the base of the lid was pressed a gleaming silver dollar. It twinkled, even in the dim light. We figured we'd just bury it with him, but well, when the time came, it just didn't feel right. Like it still had some life in it, you know? Then the boss's wife, she came up with this great idea. He smiled, at no one in particular. She said, "You never know when you might need a little magic around the place." Then, from the corner table, I caught the words, "But Mom, this place is boring." It was like a spell being cast on me. The coins in my pocket jingled of their own accord, and my eyes began to twinkle. I knew exactly what to do. I knew exactly what to say. "Say, little girl, have you ever seen a silver dollar?" The British are known for many things, among them perhaps the most being their ability to maintain a stiff upper lip even under the most difficult of circumstances.
So we're going to take a look at one of those circumstances in Bill Bryson's The Final Night on the Titanic.
"Good Lord, Bus, what's all the commotion?"
Oh, hello, Smythe. Not like you to be up at this hour. Smoke?
"Oh, thank you. Don't mind if I do. So, what's the kerfuffle? I saw the captain as I came by, and he looked in a dreadful stew."
Oh, it appears we're sinking, old boy.
"Oh, never."
Yes, do you recall that iceberg we saw at dinner?
"Oh, the one that was as big as a 20-story building?"
That's the one. Well, it seems we struck the deuced thing.
Rotten luck.
Rather.
Suppose that explains why my cabin door was underneath the bed when I woke up. Thought it a bit odd. I say, is this a Monte Cristo?
H. Upman, actually. I have a man in Gerrard Street who gets them specially.
Awfully nice.
Yes. Pity, really.
What's that?
Well, I just ordered a dozen boxes at 2 guineas each. Still, I suppose young Bertie will be glad to get his hands on them.
So you don't think we're going to make it?
Doesn't look good. Mrs. Buss asked Croker, the quarterdeck steward, when he brought her nightcap, and he said we had less than 2 hours. Oh, how's Mrs. Smythe, by the way? Is her stomach better?
Couldn't say. She's drowned, you see.
Oh, rotten luck.
Went out the starboard porthole when we started to list. It was her shout that woke me, matter of fact. Shame she's missed all the excitement. She always enjoyed a good sinking.
Oh, Mrs. Buss is just the same.
She didn't go over as well, did she?
Oh, no. She's gone to see the purser. Wanted to cable Fortune and Masons and cancel the order for the garden fete. Not much point now, you see.
Quite. Still, all in all, it's not been a bad voyage, wouldn't you say?
Couldn't agree more. Why, the food's been top-notch. Why, young Kate was particularly taken with the play settings. She thought the dinner table a picture and the grapes thrilling. Why, she stayed from soup to nuts. You haven't seen her by any chance, have you?
No, why do you ask?
Well, it's just that she rushed off in a rather odd way. Said there was something she had to do with young Lord Darcy before she went under. Something to do with flags, I gather.
Flags? How odd.
Well, she made some reference to needing a Jolly Roger, if I heard her right. I can't pretend to understand half the things she goes on about. And in any case, I was somewhat distracted. You see, Mrs. Buss had just spilled her nightcap down her peignoir. In consequence of the impact, you see. and was in a terrible temper because Croaker wouldn't bring her another. He told her to go get it herself.
What extraordinary insolence.
I suppose he was in a bit out of sorts because he won't be getting his tips now, will he? Can't say I blame him, really.
Still.
No. I reported him, of course. One has to remember one's station, even in a crisis, or we should be in a terrible mess. Don't you agree? The quartermaster assured me he won't get another posting on this ship.
I should think not.
Bit of a technicality, I suppose, but at least it's been noted in the book.
It's been a funny all night when you think about it. I mean to say, wife drowns, ship sinks, and there was no Montrachet 07 at dinner. Had to settle for a very middling 05.
Oh, you think that's disappointing? Have a look at these.
Sorry, old boy, I can't see in this light. What are they?
Return tickets.
That is bad luck.
Outside port cabin on the promenade deck.
Oh, very bad luck. I say, what's that noise?
Well, that'll be the steerage passengers drowning, I expect.
No, it sounded like a band.
Yes, I believe you're right. Yes, you're quite right. Oh, a bit mournful, don't you think? I shouldn't want to try to dance to that.
Nearer my God to thee, isn't it? Might have chosen something a bit more festive for our last night at sea.
Still, I think I'll wander down and see if they put out supper yet. Coming.
No, I think I'll turn in with a brandy. It's going to be a short night as it is. How long have we got, do you suppose?
Oh, about 40 minutes, I'd say.
Oh dear. Perhaps I'll skip the brandy then. I don't suppose I'll be seeing you again?
Not in this life, old sport.
Oh, I say, that's very good. I must remember that. Well, good night then.
Good night.
Oh, by the by, just a thought. The captain didn't say anything about getting into lifeboats, did he?
Not that I'd recall. Shall I wake you if he makes an announcement?
Oh, that would be very good of you, if you're sure it's no trouble.
No trouble at all.
Well, good night then. Give my regards to Mrs. Buss and young Kate.
With the greatest pleasure. I am sorry about Mrs. Smythe.
Well, worse things happen at sea, as they say. I expect she'll bob up somewhere. She was awfully buoyant. Well, good night.
Good night, old sport. Sleep well. Hello, my name's Daniel Phelps, and I've been with Imagine Performing Arts since the beginning. The story I'm going to tell tonight is one that I am so excited to share. When you do historical research like I do, you oftentimes find stories that you didn't even know existed, and some that have been sort of lost to time for whatever reason. So when I found this story, I knew that it had to be told at some point. It is one of my absolute favorites. This is the story of the first car in Connersville. Good evening, and welcome to the Little Detroit Historic Museum. I'm Daniel, and I'll be your guide for your tour. You may already be familiar with some of Connersville's automotive history. The first car produced in Little Detroit was the McFarlane, starting in 1909. Isn't she a beauty? And if you'll step over here, you can see the other vehicles built in Connersville. In 1910, the Lexington Company moved here, followed by the Empire Company. And the late 1920s saw the development of the Auburn and the Cord 810 and the 812 vehicles. As you can see, the cars became larger and more elegant as time went on. Why, by 1910, they even had roofs to protect from the rain. They added a back seat so the whole family could ride. And they developed isinglass windows, a kind of celluloid that could be rolled up or down. You see, glass would be too fragile on the bumpy roads. But long before any of these models were developed, Dr. Ephraim Derbyshire brought the first horseless carriage to Connersville. It arrived in November of 1901, all the way from Detroit. The good doctor had retired from his practice in Bentonville and was active in Connersville's local civic organizations. He and his wife, Emma, had one daughter, Catherine. Now, if you'll step over here, I'll show you Dr. Derbyshire's 1901 Oldsmobile. This is the actual vehicle. As you can see, it wasn't much more than a bench on wheels with an engine in the back and a stick to steer with. It had 5.5 horsepower and could reach the dangerous, mind-numbing speeds of 25 miles per hour. With so little protection, 25 miles an hour could actually be very dangerous. Now, you couldn't drive in an automobile if it was raining, because there was no roof, and you'd get wet. You also wouldn't want to drive in the winter. It would be too cold. And the roads? Well, the roads were made for horses and wagons, and functional shock absorbers were still a few years away. Unless the road was paved, the ride was pretty bumpy. So really, the first cars were just little more than a rich man's toy. Now, if you look closely, you'll see that this front part of the Oldsmobile curves up. Well, that prevented anything in the street from splashing up on the driver's feet. If you'll remember, there were mostly horses on the streets. So you can guess what the drivers didn't want splashing up. Now, if you look closely right here, you can see where the metal was dented and then hammered out. But it looks like they missed a spot. You see, this car was the first automobile in Connorsville, and that spot is all that remains of the first automobile wreck in Connorsville. We're told that Dr. Derbyshire liked to drive and that he'd take people in the neighborhood for a ride sometimes. Mrs. Derbyshire said that the horseless carriage made her nervous and she preferred to walk or just take a normal carriage. But their daughter Catherine loved to drive. She was in her 30s, and her father had scared off any potential husbands, so she needed something to do. There it was, driving up Central Avenue one day. Now, the newspaper accounts said that she was at a fair speed, and we don't know exactly what that means, but we can guess that she probably was driving fairly fast. We don't know where she was going either, or why she was in such a hurry, but as it happens, when you tend to drive a little fast on roads that were not meant for cars in those days, the wheel got caught in the gutter, and the car spun out of control. Remember that she was steering with a simple stick. And so, it's no surprise that she was thrown off of the street and ran headfirst into a tree. Now, this is, of course, many, many, many years before seatbelts were existed. So she was thrown 10 feet from the vehicle. The newspaper says she sustained painful injuries and mentions that her face was badly bruised. Thankfully, there were some people nearby who had seen her and were able to get her immediate medical attention, and she did survive and was fine for the rest of her many, many years of life. And it made for a good story down the line for her ancestors. Now, unfortunately, one of the problems that comes with having the first car in Connorsville and the first wreck is that there are no car mechanics. And unfortunately, due to the wreck, the two front wheels of the car were broken off completely, and this curved part was dented when she hit the tree. So what do? Well, thankfully, in many ways, an axle is an axle. So they took it to a local buggy maker who, with some thought and careful consideration, was able to restore almost all of it. And to this day, if you look in the right place as you drive up Central, you can see where the tree was damaged in the crash. Now, 8 years later, cars were becoming commonplace, and the factories were opening up. But this one right here, this was the first car in Connorsville. It was also in the first car crash. Thank you.
My name's Cindy Perez. I'm a founding member of Imagine Performing Arts, and I'll be presenting a piece that I wrote a few years ago in a creative exchange. It was a steampunk exchange. You wrote a story and you created some objects that went with it and were sent to someone else, and they sent you their story and their objects. So I don't have the original objects, but I have a few others to put in their place. It's a story about a steampunk adventuress of the Victorian age, and to keep her travels light, she has to unload her backpack and send packages home. So this is my story of Susanna Orlando. My name is Susanna Orlando, granddaughter of the famous Herschel Canby. The following are some accounts of my adventures as I search for the inspiration that will assist me in making my mark on the world. Grandpa left me a tidy sum of money, but I use it conservatively. One never knows when you might need a nest egg to bankroll the world's next great invention. You see, it's up to me to carry on the legacy of my grandfather. And it's best to travel light when you're an adventuress, so periodically I pack up little parcels and I send them home and get the things out of my backpack. For instance, in this package, the first item is my octopus necklace. This is a reminder of the beginning of my world tour. On a beautiful full moon evening, a team of adventurers and I met on the beach in Providence, Rhode Island, and we were ferried out by rowboat to the Nautilus submersible. It was an awe-inspiring marvel that carried us far below the ocean depths. It showed us mountain ranges along the ocean floor, and through the portholes we observed a multitude of sea inhabitants. The dance of the giant squids and the octopi, it was magnificent. And it was a little frightening at times when their tentacles went around our vessel, but quite thrilling. And then there is this little box that holds a compass. Now, when we were on the submersible, this very sweet man would sit beside me day after day, and I would remark, "Oh my God, this is so beautiful. I wonder where we are." And I told him of my dreams of being an adventuress and being a famous inventor, and upon landing at the stunning white cliffs of Dover, well, he handed me this little box that within holds a compass. And he told me that this would help me to find my way and know where I was, and that when I was finished with my adventures, it would help me find my way home. I think perhaps what he really wanted was for me to find my way back to him. And perhaps someday I will. The captain on our voyage, he told me a little bit more about this very strange little compass. It is a seaman's novelty, really. Not sure how much I trust its accuracy. They tell me that when you are far out in the Atlantic, in this area called the Bermuda Triangle, well, this compass is used. Apparently, this area has some very strange, otherworldly magnetic pull. And the poles get confused, and nobody knows up from down or east from west. And so they take this compass and they drop it into a bowl of water, and the whole thing, not just the hands, the whole thing begins to shudder and stutter, and the wheels turn, and when it lands, the navigator takes note and points the ship due north. Now, I was never allowed to find out if this actually works. I couldn't find a crew that was brave enough to take me to this triangle. But that's exactly my kind of adventure, not knowing east from west or up from down. So for now, I'll pack it away. It's to remind those who look upon it that there are things that are not always up or down or the way that our mortal minds think that they should be. And then from Dover, we took a steam locomotive north. Now, I had heard stories of King Arthur and the knights of old, and I was intent on finding some of the magical treasures that they had brought back from their quests. In an antiquities shop hidden away in the Cotswolds village was a small man with an enormous tabby cat who sat and drank tea all day long, and he smoked this most interesting pipe. Now, he said that it was made from the horn of the last unicorn. Right, I think it looked a little like cow bone to me, but aside from that, when I told him of my desire to find some of the treasures and mysteries of those knights of old, he got a queer look on his face. He quietly got up, moved to the back of the store, moved a rug, loosed a floorboard, and pulled out a little linen bag. He brought it over to me and he said, "I've been waiting for you. Many years ago, a twisted little elf came into my shop with instructions to keep this safe until a lady would come from far away looking for it. And then out of the linen bag, he pulled a small bottle with a very odd stopper. Inside was a sparkling dust. He didn't know what it was. Now, I did a few rudimentary experiments, but I need to wait until later when I have an equipped laboratory to really find out what this is. The knights traveled far and wide and in their quests, and who knows really where this came from and where it originated with this dust. But how exciting to have something so profound and beset with the prophecy of my arrival. Now, I have one last item, and I hate to part with it, but I would be heartbroken if it got lost in my travels. So I send it for safekeeping. While I was sipping very strong Turkish coffee in a cafe in Constantinople, I met an intriguing man with a story of a time machine. We recessed to his house for a water pipe of something intoxicating and delightful. Afterward, I set my eyes on a gleaming brass and glass object that became the biggest adventure to date. It was a time machine, and after a bit of negotiating, I paid the man with the funds I had on hand and a promise of some other things I probably shouldn't mention in proper company. And he commenced to create what he called the boarding pass. The machine is started and guided on its way through a series of controls, which includes something the gentleman called an iris scanner. Quite bizarre. I was to look through this little hole on the boarding pass at this little glowing spot on the machine. And then little wheels were turned and the machine was tuned to a place and a time in the future or the past. And, well, frankly, it was amazing. It was just the most marvelous time. After my initial trial run, which I used to get to visit my grandfather and discuss with him some ideas I have in my notebook of noteworthy inventions, I returned to our current time to record my adventure. Well, the next morning, I went back to the house because I was looking forward to using my boarding pass one more time. And the house was gone. The house, all of its contents, everything was vanished. Perhaps something went awry with the time-space continuum. I don't know. But I have no more use for my precious boarding pass. So we'll keep it safe at home, and perhaps this wonderful contraption will find its way back to our place in time someday. These precious items I'm sealing away in this package, sending them on a journey. And I, with my lightened pack, I step forth on the path of new adventures. Destiny awaits, and I have no choice but to greet her each day with renewed curiosity and enthusiasm. Carpe diem.
Okay, my name is Frank Markham. I'm a retired special education teacher. Over almost the past 5 years, I've been a major recruiter in the music performers that we've had here at Imagine Performing Arts. And tonight, I was wishing to share some songs over the years that I have written. So hope you enjoy. This first one that I wrote, this would definitely not make the Billboard Top 100 ever, but it will always be number one in my heart because a few years after my daughter was born, I wrote this song about her. It's called Christy's Song. Falling in love is easy to do. Now that I found someone like you, but I was so afraid that you might go away. Till today, God gave to me something special in my life. Little baby girl had a wonderful life, and I've tried so hard to make things work out right in our life. In our life. Daddy, can we go to the park and play today? I think I'll catch some fireflies along the way. A young man turns into an old man at the blink of an eye. He thinks about yesterday and how time flies. But as long as the stars shine above, there will never be a father who loves his daughter half as much as I love you. Oh, I love you. Oh, I love you. This next song came about when I was working at a lockup facility for youth that tend to harm themselves, and I came away from this song, and it's called Kaylee. With a tear in her eye, she said with a sigh, I don't cry much anymore. I don't cry much anymore. At least not today. I didn't ask to be born. I didn't ask to be here. All that I've ever known is a bitter sting of tears. Kaylee, my sweet Kaylee, I'm as close as I can be, and I swear to you I'll always be by your side. 'Cause you're not alone, you're not alone anymore. She said in my dreams I'm haunted by a voice that won't go away. Nobody loves me, so why don't I just run away? Kaylee, my sweet Kaylee, I'm as close as I can be, and I swear to you I'll always be by your side. But you're not alone, you're not ask me why I hurt myself, but you can't understand. I'm just a frightened little girl praying for a helping hand. Kaylee, my sweet Kaylee, I'm as close as I can be, and I swear to you I'll always be by your side. With a tear in her eye, she said with a sigh, I don't cry much anymore. I don't cry much anymore. At least not today.
My name's Ron Foreman, and just like Cindy and my wife Belinda, I too am a founding member of IPA. Tonight I'm going to read a few poems for you, and the first one will be by Edgar Allan Poe. Now, Edgar is known for writing some macabre stories, but poetry has a sense of bringing truth out for people, and I feel that it did that for him. So the first one I'll be reading is Annabel Lee. It was many and many a year ago, in the kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child, she was a child, in this kingdom by the sea. But we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out a cold chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kingsman came and bore her away from me to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels not half so happy in heaven went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of a cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was strong, by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. Neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide I lay down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in the sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. I'd like to finish this up with one last poem. We are drawing close to Halloween, something just a little bit lighter, from a local poet, James Whitcomb Riley, Little Orphan Annie. Little Orphan Annie came to our house to stay, and wash the cups and saucers up, and brush the crumbs away, and shoo the chickens off the porch, and dust the hearth and sweep, and make the fire and bake the bread, and earn her board and keep. And all us chillin', when the supper things are done, we sit around the kitchen fire and have the most of fun, a-listening to the witches' tale that Annie tells about, and the goblins a get you if you don't watch out. Once there was this little boy, wouldn't say his prayers, so when he went to bed at night, away upstairs, his mammy heard him holler, and his daddy heard 'em bawl. And then they turned the kivers down. He wasn't there at all. And they seeked in the rafter room, and cubby hole and press, and seeked him up the chimney flue, and everywhere, I guess. But all they ever found was just pants and roundabout, and the goblins will get you if you don't watch out. And once this little girl awed, laughed, and grinned, and made fun of everyone, even her blood and kin. And once in the company, and the old folks was there, she mocked 'em and shocked 'em and said she didn't care. And twice she kicked her heels and turned to run and hide. There were two great big black things a-standing by her side. Then they snatched her through the ceiling, for she knowed she was about, and the goblins will get you if you don't watch out. And little orphan Annie says, when the blaze is blue, and the lamp wick spitters, and the wind goes woo, and you hear the crickets quit, and the moon is gray, and the lightning bug and dew is all squinched away. You better mind your parents and your teachers fond and dear, and cherish thems that loves you, and dry the orphan's tear. And heap of poor and needy ones at clusters all about, or the goblins will get you if you don't watch out. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Carla Beard. Every teacher believes that they could write stories about things that happen at school and nobody would ever believe them. So I created Mrs. Carnahan to tell those stories. Now, over the 4 and a bit, almost 5 years of Imagine This, the Mrs. Carnahan stories have been told when we had an act who canceled on us at the last minute. But tonight, I wrote the story just for tonight. Hi, I'm Margaret Carnahan, and I teach math at Hamptonville High School. My husband Don and I were cleaning out the garage, and we found this basketball in a box of things he brought home from his last day as a teacher 20 years ago. That's how we met, you know. It was my first year at Hamptonville, and he taught social studies down the hall from me. He'd been the assistant basketball coach for a couple of seasons, but that year the head coach's little girl was diagnosed with cancer early in December. It was stage 4 before they even caught it. It was so sad. And the coach, of course, had stepped down from his job to spend more time with her. So Don had been appointed the interim head coach. The team had done well that season, and he was a lock for head coach next year. Rumor was that he was also going to be appointed athletic director. He liked that idea. He liked coaching basketball. He thought athletics was an essential part of education. Things were looking good for him. It was a Thursday afternoon. Don and I had been meeting in the faculty room to grade papers and blow off steam during our prep periods for the last few weeks. I remember he brought me a fancy cupcake on my birthday. And I kind of figured we'd be seeing a little more of each other after basketball season was over. Well, I was late getting there that day, had some emails I had to answer, and as I walked in, I heard voices around the corner. Now, unless there's something going on in the classroom, I'm not normally one to eavesdrop on other people's conversations. But this sounded like there was something going on. I paused by the door, and I heard the words, "So I hope you can make that happen, Coach. I would be grateful." Don murmured something in reply. A chair scooted back, and I stepped in as if I had just arrived. Ben Malini, the president of the school board, was just leaving. "Good to see you, Margie," he said. "I stopped by to wish Coach good luck in the sectional tomorrow night." And he was gone. I closed the door. Margie? Right. What was that all about? Don sighed. his grandson. Travis? Yeah, he thinks Travis should be getting more playing time, especially now that sectionals are coming up. He's a senior, you know. But I whispered, Travis isn't very good, is he? You only play him when the team's up by at least 10 points. There was a long pause. Finally, Don said, my future as an athletic director, as a coach, even as a teacher here, depends on how much playing time Travis gets tomorrow night. Can he do that? Well, of course he can. He's the school board president. He's either your best friend or a hatchet man. Look, let's talk about something else. How did that lesson go? What was it, polynomials? How did that work out for you? Friday night came. We had the first game of the sectional, and our opponent was our traditional rival, the Harrison Wildcats, a team that was also having a good year. The gym was full, faces were painted, the pep band was loud. The referee tossed the ball, and it was on. First quarter was rough. Both teams racked up fouls. Things settled down in the second quarter, and the score stayed close. Travis sat conspicuously on the bench. His grandpa sat right behind him. Now, Travis is a likable guy. After high school, he did well for himself selling insurance. But really, golf is his game. You don't have to be quite as coordinated for golf. You don't have to think fast on your feet quite the same way. He's a good guy. He was just playing the wrong game. In the third quarter, the Wildcats jumped out to a 7-point lead, the biggest lead of the game. Don called timeout. The kids settled down. They started winning back some points. And by the end of the fourth quarter, we were tied. And it stayed that way to the final buzzer. Overtime. The next 4 minutes would determine more than who won the sectionals. And then Don did the last thing I expected. He called Travis over, said a few words, sent him in. In less than a minute, he fouled a player from Harrison. A foul in overtime. He was back on the bench in nothing flat. The player he fouled didn't make either free throw, thank goodness. Hamptonville made 1 bucket. Harrison didn't. And when the buzzer sounded, we won! The gym exploded with cheers. Don was mobbed. I looked over at Malini. Travis said something to him before he ran to join the celebration in the middle of the floor. Malini looked a little stunned, and then he smiled and shook his head to himself. We had won the sectionals for the first time in 15 years. We lost at regionals, but everyone was happy. When the school board met in the spring, they came through for Don, head basketball coach and athletic director. I asked him, "What did you say to Travis before you sent him in at sectionals?" I think he repeated it to his grandfather later. Don told him, "I needed a hatchet man, someone who could spoil their plans. I told him to foul their number 23. He was having an off night. Shots weren't going in. I told Travis it could be the most important play of the evening." Hatchet man? Hatchet man kind of spoils someone else's plans. "Margaret," he said, "if I take that job, I will be under Molini's thumb until he retires from the school board. And he's got 2 more grandkids coming up." He handed in his resignation. That first summer, he worked as a loan officer at the credit union, but it wasn't really a good fit. The day he told me he got into law school, I knew he had found his niche. So I proposed. As it turns out, years later, Travis coached our son Bob in Little League basketball. In one game, he winked at Don as he put his arm around Bob's shoulder and said, "Bobby, I need a hatchet man." Thank you.
On behalf of Imagine Performing Arts, tonight is special. It does have a little melancholy, but that's okay. We would like to thank you for being with us. We've been doing this almost 5 years now, and tonight, unfortunately, will be our last time together. But Imagine Performing Arts is not going anywhere. Be sure to come and see us in our latest play, which will be this November, the 18th through the 20th, which will be Oliver. Plus, we'll be doing many other things. So, on behalf of Imagine Performing Arts, myself, and our crew tonight, thank you and good night.